The steady beep-beep of the heart monitor echoed through the silent hospital room. Ethan Cole, the man newspapers called the Iron CEO, stood frozen by the bedside. His breath caught somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. There she was, Dr. Alina Rivera, the woman who once saved his life, now fighting for her own. Her pale face looked nothing like the fiery woman he remembered. But what shook him wasn't the oxygen mask or the silence. It was the three little girls curled up beside her bed, identical eyes, soft curls, and faces that mirrored his own. One of them stirred, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Mommy said Daddy would come," she whispered softly, clutching a worn photograph of Ethan. His world, the deals, the power, the empire, all crumbled in that single heartbeat. He hadn't just found a patient, he'd found his family. Ethan Cole had spent years convincing himself that emotions were liabilities, things that clouded judgment and cost fortunes. In boardrooms, he was untouchable. In life, he was unreachable. But no amount of logic could explain why his hands trembled as he stood in that sterile hospital ward, staring at the unconscious woman who once shattered his walls. Dr. Alina Rivera, his ex-wife, his first and only love, lay motionless under the soft glow of the medical lights. The woman who once laughed in chaos, who once promised she'd never leave, now looked like she'd already said goodbye. A nurse approached quietly, noticing Ethan's distant stare. "You're her emergency contact," she said softly. "She's been in critical care for 2 days. The accident was severe." But she kept asking for someone before the nurse hesitated. "For you." The words hit like thunder. For him, Ethan's chest tightened. They hadn't spoken in almost 5 years, not since that cruel, final argument that ended everything. He remembered that night vividly. The storm outside, her tears, and his cold, careless words, "Maybe love isn't enough." But it wasn't just the memory that tore through him now. It was the sight of 3 little girls curled up on a worn hospital couch, sleeping soundly beside each other. One clutched a stuffed bear, another held a drawing, and the smallest one had a bracelet engraved with the name E. Cole Jr. Ethan's throat closed. Could it be? He crouched slowly, afraid that any sudden movement would shatter the fragile air around them. One of the girls stirred, blinking sleepy eyes that looked exactly like his own. Same gray flecks, same curious tilt. "Are you my daddy?" she whispered, her tiny voice trembling with both hope and fear. Ethan's heart stopped. He wanted to speak, but no words came. Before he could answer, a soft voice from behind spoke, an older nurse. "They've been here every night since the accident," she said gently. "Alina refused to leave them even when she was transferred to the ICU. She said their father would come. She said he'd find them when it mattered most." Ethan stood slowly, tears burning his eyes. Their father. He had walked away from Alina when the pressure of his empire grew too heavy, convincing himself it was mercy. He thought she'd be better off without the chaos of his world. He never knew she carried his children, 3 pieces of a love he'd buried beneath ambition. He moved closer to the bed, brushing a strand of hair from Alina's face. "I'm here now," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm sorry I wasn't before." As he spoke, the smallest girl woke fully, clutching her mother's hand. "Mommy said when Daddy comes, everything will be okay again," she said, her innocence piercing through years of regret. Ethan knelt beside her. "I'll make sure of that," he murmured, promising words he'd never said before, not in business, not in love, not even to himself. Then, for the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the man who controlled everything, realized there was one thing he could never control: fate. And tonight, fate had led him right back to the family he never knew he had. The steady beep-beep of the heart monitor echoed through the room as dawn crept in through the half-drawn hospital blinds. Ethan hadn't moved all night. He sat beside Alina's bed, watching every flicker of her eyelids, every shallow rise and fall of her chest, afraid that if he blinked, she'd slip away again. 3 little girls slept curled together at the foot of the bed, covered with a blanket Ethan had brought from his car. He didn't know how to hold them, or what to say, but somehow, they clung to him, trusting him without question. He had failed them before even knowing they existed. Now he silently swore he'd never fail again. When Alina stirred, it was barely noticeable, a twitch of her fingers, a flutter of lashes. Ethan leaned forward instantly, his hand trembling as he reached for hers. "Alina," his voice broke softly. "It's me." Her eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding them before recognition set in. "Ethan." Her voice was weak, barely a whisper, but it sliced through him sharper than any deal or betrayal ever had. He nodded, his throat tight. Yeah, it's me. She blinked, tears welling as memories rushed back. The fights, the distance, the goodbye she never wanted to say. You shouldn't be here, she murmured. You made it clear. We were over. Ethan shook his head, his voice thick with guilt. I was wrong. I was so damn wrong. She looked away, pain flickering across her face. Wrong doesn't erase years, Ethan, or what they went through without you. He followed her gaze to the three sleeping girls, their small faces peaceful in the soft light. They're mine, he whispered, more to himself than to her. Aren't they? Alina's silence was enough. The truth hit him with devastating clarity. All those years while he chased success, drowned in power, and told himself he didn't need love, she had carried his heart in three little bodies. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. She looked at him, eyes glistening. You left, Ethan. You didn't even look back. I tried once, but your assistant said you were too busy to talk. So I stopped trying. I had them, and I promised they'd never feel like they weren't enough. His jaw tightened. He had spent his life fighting for everything except the one thing that truly mattered. He stood and took a shaky breath. I don't deserve forgiveness, he said, but I need to make things right. I want to be in their lives. Yours too, if you'll let me. Alina smiled faintly, a sad, tired smile. You can't just walk back and fix everything, Ethan. Life doesn't work that way. Maybe not, he admitted, kneeling beside her bed, but I'll spend the rest of mine trying. Her tears spilled quietly. You always said emotions made you weak, she said softly. But look at you now. He smiled through his tears. Then let me be weak for once. For you, for them. One of the girls stirred at that moment, the middle one, Ella. She rubbed her eyes and looked up sleepily. Mommy, she murmured. Then her gaze shifted to Ethan. Daddy stayed all night. Alina's breath hitched as she turned to Ethan. They called you Daddy. Ethan nodded, emotion choking his voice. They just knew. The room fell into a tender silence. Alina reached for his hand, hesitant, trembling, but real. For the first time in years, she didn't pull away. Maybe, she whispered, this is our second chance. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. No, he said, eyes glistening. This time, it's our first real one. The morning sunlight spilled softly into the hospital room, turning everything golden. It wasn't the cold, sterile light Ethan remembered from his business meetings. It felt alive. Like a beginning. Alina was sitting up now, her strength slowly returning. The doctors had said she'd make a full recovery, but it would take time. Ethan had promised he wouldn't leave her side until she walked out of the hospital herself. The girls were awake, scattered across the bed and floor, little bundles of energy that filled the one silent room with laughter. The oldest, Ava, was showing her sisters how to fold paper cranes. The youngest, Emma, tried and failed to copy her, crumpling the paper and giggling. Ethan sat nearby, just watching. He couldn't take his eyes off them, his daughters. Every smile, every sound felt like a gift he didn't deserve. Alina noticed his gaze and whispered, You look like you're seeing the world for the first time. He smiled faintly. Maybe I am. She studied him, remembering the man she once loved. Cold, focused, untouchable. But this version of him was different. Softer, human. You've changed, she said quietly. He nodded. I lost everything I thought mattered, just to realize what truly did. The room fell silent. Ethan stood, walked over to the window, and stared out at the city below. When I walked out 5 years ago, he said slowly, I thought love was a distraction. I thought I had to choose between being powerful and being happy. But watching you here, fighting alone, he turned back to face her. I realized I was the weakest man alive. Alina's lips trembled. You broke us, Ethan. Me, them. You can't just come back and expect it all to be okay. He crossed the room, kneeling beside her bed. His voice cracked, low and raw. I know, I don't want forgiveness. I just want a chance to be the man they can depend on, even if it means standing in the background forever. Tears welled in her eyes. You can't stand in the background forever, not when they already see you as their world. At that moment, Emma, the youngest, toddled over with her drawing. Look, Daddy, she said proudly, holding up a stick figure family. There was a man, a woman, and 3 tiny girls holding hands. Ethan's heart twisted. He lifted her gently, kissing the top of her head. It's perfect, he whispered. Ava climbed up beside Alina, holding her mother's hand. Mommy, can Daddy stay when we go home? The question hung in the air, like fragile glass. Ethan froze, looking at Alina, waiting, terrified. Alina took a deep breath. Her eyes met his, filled with years of pain, longing, and something she thought she'd lost: trust. "I don't know where we go from here," she said softly, "but maybe we can try." Ethan nodded slowly, his voice breaking. "Trying is all I need." She looked down at the girls. "Then maybe we start as a family." The three girls squealed in delight, climbing onto the bed, wrapping their little arms around both parents. Ethan laughed through his tears, the sound mixing with their giggles, messy, imperfect, real. For the first time in years, the Millionaire CEO wasn't thinking about mergers or deadlines. He wasn't the ruthless man people feared, he was just Ethan, a father holding the pieces of his heart that life had hidden away. Alina leaned into him, whispering, "You know, I never stopped believing you'd come back." He smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "And I never stopped needing you, even when I didn't know it." The monitor beeped softly, steady, peaceful, the sound of healing. Of life. Outside the hospital, the world went on as usual, but inside that small room, a broken family found something stronger than forgiveness. They found home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this. Tell me in the comments, should Alina forgive Ethan completely, or should he prove himself first before earning her love back? Your opinion matters. Every story here is inspired by the choices you make. Subscribe for more heart-touching love and reunion stories filled with emotion, redemption, and second chances. Because sometimes, love doesn't end, it just finds a new way to begin.